Hello guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about the heart sounds. So heart sounds represent a turbulence that is created by the closure of the heart valves. We have physiological sounds, which are the normal sounds that the heart creates. And we have pathological sounds that are created when we have particular heart problems, and most commonly valvular problems. Physiological heart sounds are S1, which is created by the closure of mitral and tricuspid valves, and this is the start of systole. S2, which is created by the closure of aortic and pulmonary valves, and that represents the start of diastole. Here you can hear and see the lobbed up pattern of systole and diastole. We also have additional sounds like S3 and S4. S3 sound can occur early in rapid ventricular filling, and it may represent the tensing of chordae tendineae, which is the connective tissue that holds the mitral and tricuspid valves in place. It is normal in children and pregnant women and well-trained athletes, and if it's heard in adults, it may indicate ventricular dilation. S4 sound is almost always pathological, and it is created when we have a pressure overload on a stiff ventricle due to low ventricular compliance, and therefore it is heard in cases of ventricular hypertrophy, myocardial ischemia, and in older adults. About the pathological sounds, which are also known as the heart murmurs, we can classify them as systolic murmurs and diastolic murmurs. In systolic murmurs, we have mid or ejection systolic murmur, which occurs in cases of aortic stenosis and pulmonary stenosis. For the aortic stenosis, it is best heard at the second right intercostal space, and for pulmonary stenosis, it is best heard at the second left intercostal space. It can radiate to the carotids. It is characterized by a harsh, rough sound. There is an ejection click that is due to the opening of the rigid cusps of the aortic valve, and then it's followed by a diamond-shaped crescendo-decrescendo murmur. Here you can see the crescendo-decrescendo pattern. Another systolic sound is a hollow or pan-systolic sound, which is commonly caused by mitral and tricuspid regurgitation. For the mitral regurgitation, it is best heard at the apex, and for tricuspid regurgitation, it is best heard at the tricuspid area, which is the fourth left intercostal space. For mitral regurgitation, it usually radiates to the axilla, and for tricuspid regurgitation, it radiates to the apex, and it's characterized by a soft blowing sound. And this sound is represented by rectangular pattern that goes all along systole, hence the name pansystolic. Here you can see the rectangular pattern all along systole. Also, we have another systolic murmur, which is known as the late systolic murmur, and it occurs in cases of mitral valve prolapse. It is best heard at the apex, the fifth intercostal space mid-clavicular line, and it can radiate to the axilla. And it also represents a systolic murmur that begins after a mid-systolic click and completes to the end of systole. Here you can see the mid-systolic click that precedes the late systolic murmur. Now let's talk about the diastolic murmurs. We have two important diastolic murmurs, which are the mid-diastolic murmur and the early diastolic murmur. The mid-diastolic murmur is commonly caused by mitral stenosis and tricuspid stenosis. It is best heard at the apex for mitral stenosis and at the tricuspid area for tricuspid stenosis. There is no radiation, which means it is a localized murmur, and it is characterized by a rumbling sound. There will be an opening snap, and it is followed by a murmur, which is the mid-diastolic murmur. Here you can see the opening snap, and it is followed by the mid-diastolic murmur. The early diastolic murmur is commonly caused by aortic regurgitation and pulmonary regurgitation. For aortic regurgitation, it is best heard at the third intercostal space, left sternal border, which is already known as the Erb's point. It is a decrescendo murmur that is occupying the first half of diastole. Here you can see the decrescendo murmur that occurs in early diastole. If you hear the murmur, you should be able to describe whether it's systolic or diastolic, and you should be able to describe the duration, for example, pansystolic or mid-systolic. And also you should describe the site that is best heard at, like for example the apex or the tricuspid area. And you should describe the radiation, and you should describe the grade. Murmurs can be graded on a scale from 1 to 6, starting with a very faint murmur that can only be heard by a stethoscope, and ending with an audible murmur that can be heard without the use of stethoscope and associated with a palpable thrill. I have created a PDF summary about heart sounds. I will put a link down below so you can download this summary. This is all that I have for this video. Make sure you're subscribed and follow for more videos, and thanks for watching.